Okay, welcome back to the next part of VMware PowerCLI module. So in the last part we have completed up to step number 481, where we have set our PowerCLI configuration invalid certificate action and warnings to false. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. Now from the next step onwards we are actually executing some commands on vCenter server. Okay, so next step is we need to connect to vCenter server through our PowerCLI module. Okay, so what is that command to connect to vCenter server via PowerCLI? So it's a connect -vi server, then -server. After that, the FQDN of our vCenter server, and then the user will be administrator at vspare.local, and password will be our password. Okay, so I'm just entering that command, and after entering it will show us the connection with our VMware vCenter server. Okay, copying this particular command and now directly pasting in our my DC system. Okay, so here I need to just change one parameter over here. I just need to put my vCenter server administrator SSO administrator password, because we are connecting through our administrator at vspare.local account. So I'm just entering that password over here, and once it is connected I'm coming back to you with the next step. Alright, so I have entered that particular command along with my vCenter server password, and it is now, you can see, it is connected to my vCenter server. It is showing the FQDN vCenter, the port through which it is connected, and the user is vspare.local/administrator. Okay, so this way the first step is to connect to your vCenter server so that we can execute further PowerCLI commands on vCenter server. Okay, so I hope I am clear. So coming back to our diagram, now we are working on a vCenter server through PowerCLI. Okay, now I will come back to you with this diagram again and again, just to explain you guys that particularly what step we are executing. Okay, so now the first command got executed. Now let's move on to the next practical step. So let's move on to the next step. So next step is we need to set our data center entity as a variable. Okay, continue through Windows 2022 DC PowerShell, run the following command number 5. So command to connect to ESX host underscore DC data center cluster in vCenter as a variable. Now why variable? Because variable can help us to give a certain command at that particular level through PowerShell, right? So if you are aware of how PowerShell works, PowerShell are commands are always working on various variables instead of various entities. It's a group of entities, you can set it as a variable. Once that variable is set for that session, then you can map your commands to those variables. Okay, so the first variable we are setting over here is our ESX host DC. Okay, now why ESX host DC? Let me come back to my vCenter server. Let's minimize this, let's try to understand. And if I'm going to my GUI, this is my ESX host DC, this is my cluster under which the two ESX hosts are mapped. So if I am giving some kind of a command on this level, it will automatically replicate to sub levels or the subdomains. So these sub levels are ESX hosts. So I'm setting the variable for my ESX host DC cluster. Okay. Okay, so let's copy that command from our PPT. So I'm just copying this below line command. Coming back to my DC system and my PowerShell module, and then entering. So what this command does is setting up the variable as $dc is equal to get data center name ESX host DC. So the data center name over here is ESX host DC. So this entity is mapped with our this particular variable. Okay, $dc. I hope I'm clear up to this point. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. So this particular command we have already copied. All right, so moving to the next command. So next command is we need to create our VDS switch through Windows 2022 DC system. Okay, so the next command 6 is to create a new virtual distribution switch on data center level with one uplink. Okay, so what is the command? New VDS switch. Location will be our $dc, that is our data center. Name will be VDS dash internet, and uplink number will be 1. Okay, so coming back to my PPT, just to copy this particular whole command, and now going back to my DC system and entering the second command over here. Okay, so new VDS switch location DC means this particular variable data center, because we need to create the VDS switch on data center level. So DC name will be VDS internet and uplink will be 1, and I'm just hitting enter over here. So it is creating that uplink VDS virtual distribution switch with one uplink. Now how to verify whether it has created that distribution switch or not? So I will come back here. I will go to ESX host DC level. I will go to configure, and there is one more option over here. It is networks. Okay, now under networks we can verify under distribution switch that VDS dash internet has been created. It has been created by our command. Okay, the version is 8.0.3, everything it has selected by default. Okay, the uplink is 1. So with help of this command we have created our distributed switch. Why do we require distributed switch? How to create it through your GUI also, everything I have covered in my previous part, so you can see that video if you want to. Okay, so this command got completed successfully. Now let's move on to the next command. So next command number 7 is for setting the variable for the new VDS switch. Now we have created it. We have created the entity, as I told you before. We have created the entity. Now we need to set the variable for that entity again. So our entity will be $VDS and get VDS switch name, and then our newly created VDS switch name is VDS.internet. So same thing, we need to map it. So I'm coming back here and I'm copying this particular command, $VDS, and going back to my DC system and entering this command. Now first we have set the variable for our data center, then under that data center or the cluster we have created one VDS switch called VDS.internet. Now we are setting up our variable for this entity also, VDS internet, as a $VDS. Okay, why? Because we need to map or we need to apply some commands on this switch level, so better to set it as a variable. So I'm entering this, and now our variable has been set. If the command got successfully completed, most of the time PowerShell will not get any message as such. So the variable has been set. For any variable successful setting, it will not give you any confirmation also. So that's fine. Now let's move on to the next command. So next command is again continue with our Windows 2022 DC only. So next command is we need to create a port group now. Okay, and that port group we need to map it to our new virtual switch. So what is the command for creating to create a distributed port group for previously created VDS? So what is that command? New VD port group hyphen VD switch, then $VDS, name internet test PG, then the numerical ports are 128 and VLAN ID is 0. Okay, so port group is a logical unit which can be used for connecting multiple virtual machines, multiple entities in VMware vSphere through your virtual switch. Okay, so this I have already explained in my previous part. Okay, so I will just come back here and I will copy the next command from here. And now go back to my DC system, and here I will just paste it, the command, and enter. Okay, now it has created the new port group also, internet test PG. Okay, now how to verify it again one more time. So I will come back here, I will come back to my VCSA GUI console, and just next to your distributor there is a distributed port groups. I will click here and you can see internet test PG is created. Okay, so through the VCSA PowerCLI commands we have completed our setup up to port group level. Okay, so internet test PG this level. Okay, we have created our VDS also, this also we have created, and then the internet test PG also we have created. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. Now we have created our VDS also, we have created our port group also. Again, next step is similar. We need to set the variable for the entity for our VDI port group. Okay, so the next command to set the variable for previously created port group. So again it is a $PG is equal to get VD port group name internet test PG. I am again and again telling you understanding variables are very essential in order to understand your PowerShell, because we are applying the commands on variable level rather than the entity level. You can apply the commands on entity level also, but it is much more easier and recommended to apply your commands on variable levels. Okay, so I'm coming back here and copying the next command and going back to my DC system, and here going to my PowerShell session, and here I'm pasting this command to set the variable for my newly created port group. Enter. As I said, for port group creation it will not give you any confirmation, but if no error is there we can safely assume that this variable has been set. Okay, so coming to the next command. So continue through your Windows 2022 DC system PowerShell. Through that, the next command number 10 is to detect and set the existing ESX host 01 esxlab.local as a variable. So now we have created everything on data center level. Now we need to detect the entity of our ESX host also. So how to detect that? So using one command we can detect our entity of ESX host 01 and set the variable. Again I am saying set the variable so that we can apply the further commands on that variable. Okay, so what is the command? So $VM host 1 is our variable name. You can give any variable name as per your choice, but this is my way. So $vm host1 is equal to get vm host name esxhost01.esxlab.local. So it will first get the esx host as an entity. It will detect using this command, and then it will set the variable as $vm host1. Okay, so coming back here and copying the next command, and then going back to my DC system. Now let me clear this screen first, and now I'm setting the variable. First I'm detecting using this command get vm host esx host01 esxlab.local, and setting the variable as vm host1. Entering. Again, it will not give you any message, but the variable has been set. Why we have setting this variable? Because we need to apply some commands on this variable. Invariably, we need to apply some commands on our esx host 01. Okay, I hope I am clear up to this point. So moving to the next command. So now we need to add our VDS switch to our VM host 1. Okay, so the command to add the ESX host 01 individual into virtual distribution switch, we need to add our uh, VM host 1, that is ESX host 01 in our VDS. Okay, so how to add that? So add VDS switch VM host. VDS switch will be our $VDS, that is our VDS internet switch, and VM host will be VM host 1. Okay, so here I am using two variables. One variable is for my virtual switch and one variable is for my virtual host, ESX host, right? Don't get confused over here. If you are not able to understand, reverse this video, understand the logic again. See, entering the command, copy pasting it, and completing the job is not the motto of our video. I'm again and again telling you, it's the important to understand what we are doing and why we are doing and how we are doing. Okay, whether we are completing or whether we are getting error, that is a second step or third step. Okay, understand first. So we are adding two variables. We have already set it previously. One variable is VDS, that is our switch, and second is your VM host, that is your ESX host. Why? Because we need to add our ESX host in our virtual switch. Same thing we have done in the previous part when I was doing that through GUI mode. Okay, so let's move on. Coming back here and copying this particular command. So copying this command, pasting it, enter. Now our VM host got added. Which VM host? VM host 1. Now what is VM host 1? It is ESX host 01.esxlab.local. So invariably ESX host 01 has been added to our VDS. The VDS is our VDS.internet virtual distributed switch. Okay, I hope I am clear up to this point. Now let's move on to the next step. So next step is we need to now detect our physical NIC which we have added, the VMnet 0 adapter which we have added in our ESX host 01. Okay, so that we can map it, the physical internet connectivity, we can map it to our VDS switch. Okay, so to detect and set newly added VMNet2, that is your VMNet0 for internet connectivity, as a variable. Okay, so what variable we are setting up over here? So $vmnic is equal to get VM host network adapter. VM host will be our VM host 1, where object name equal to vmnic2. Okay, now before continuing, I need to show you one thing over here. I'm coming back to my GUI mode and I'm clicking on ESX host 01. Okay, now if I'm clicking on configure and if I'm clicking on virtual switches, distributed switch is already showing as VDS internet. Okay, and now you can see over here my physical networks, my physical adapters are having two physical networks, VMNIC 2. This is the NIC which is having an internet connectivity, which I need to map to my distributed switch. Now to explain this again, I'm going back to my diagram and you can see over here this VMK2, VMNIC2, or you can call it as VMK2 over here. This I need to map, okay, to my virtual switch, so that it will invariably will have internet connectivity. You can see over here this is mapped to VMK2, this is also mapped to VMK2, that is for the second host, that we will do it later on. And then both this VMK1 and VMK2 and VMK2 on both the host are connected to VM0, that is virtual bridge adapter, and that is further connected to my physical NIC, which is connected to my internet. So the whole flows like this: internet connectivity from internet to physical NIC, physical NIC to VM0, VM0 to VMK2, VMK2 to distributed switch, distributed switch to port group, and port group to Windows 11 CL VM. Okay, so don't get confused over here. I have explained this diagram in detail in my previous part. So if you want to understand, please see that part again. Okay, so coming back to my command again. So now we need to set the second NIC, the NIC which is having internet connectivity, as a variable. So I'm just copying this command, coming back here and copying the whole command. And remember, we are setting this variable for ESX host 01 till now. You can see over here VM host 1. Okay, coming back to my DC system and coming back to my CLI session, power CLI session, and now see what this command means: get VM host adapter VM host 1, where object name equal to vmnic2. The same vmnic2 we have seen over here, right, under virtual switches. This is the virtual switch over here, right, and there is an option under networking. There is a virtual switch over here and there is an option called manage your physical adapters, right. We have seen that particular option, that what is the name of our physical adapter over here. So again I am explaining what we are actually doing. So if I am going to ESX01 and if I am clicking on configure option, there is an option called physical adapters. So physical adapters, this is vmnic2, this is the name of that device. Okay, so it's the same thing we have mentioned in our command, the name equal to vmnic2, and now I'm entering this command and this particular, what do you say, variable has been set. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. So next step is, or next command is, should I say, to add the vmnic2 NIC in VDS switch. So now we have identified our VMNIC2, we have set the variable also. Now we need to add our VDS switch physical network adapter, and then VM host network adapter VMNIC distributed switch will be VDS. Okay, so same command I will copy. Now what we are exactly doing, we are adding our physical NIC VMNIC2 to our distributed switch, so that our VMNIC2's internet connectivity will flow down to our distributed switch. Pasting it and enter, and it will ask us to confirm. I will say yes to all. Now this has been added. Okay, now let's move on to the next step. Now next step is we have added our VMK2 as a virtual network adapter, VM host network adapter. Now we need to assign the IP to our VMK2. So the command to create a new VM kernel adapter and assign an IP address to it. Now this is the most important command. We need to create a new VM kernel adapter, as well as we need to assign the IP, and that VM kernel adapter will be mapped to our VMNIC2, right? So what is the command? New VM host network adapter, then VM host will be our VM host 1, and then virtual switch will be our VDS switch, and port group will be internet test PG, IP will be 192.168.1.7, subnet mask will be 255.255.255.0. Okay, it's a long command, but let's break it down in portion to understand what we are actually doing. We are first in this particular command, we are creating a new VM kernel adapter. Okay, so coming back to my diagram, this particular VMK2 we are creating as a VM kernel adapter. Okay, VMK2 is a physical adapter, but in order to get it assigned with the VDS and internet test PG, first we need to add it, and then we need to create a VM kernel adapter, so that VM kernel adapter can be added as an virtual adapter to our nested VMs. Okay, I hope I'm clear up to this point. So the command over here is, first it will create the VM network kernel adapter, and then at which level it will create? It will create on VM host 1, that is CH04. It will add that VM kernel adapter to, or it will map that VM kernel adapter to VDS switch, and invariably to the port group internet test PG, and then we will assign one IP 192.168.1.7 and subnet mask 255.255.255.0. Okay, so it's a long command. I will just copy it, then I will come back here and I will paste that command over here. Okay, let me just, okay, first it will create VM kernel adapter. I'm again and again explaining you to this because this is a very important command. It may be a confusing one, but very important. First it will create the VM kernel adapter. It will add that VM kernel adapter at which level? Our VM host 1, that is ESX host 01 level. Then it will add that VM kernel adapter to our virtual distribution switch and port group internet SPG, and lastly it will give IP and subnet mask to that VM kernel adapter. I will hit enter, and you can see over here VMK2 that is mapped to VM kernel adapter. Then DHCP enable, no, it will not get the DHCP because we have mentioned the static IP 192.168.1.7. subnet mask is this, device name is VMK2. Okay, I hope I'm clear up to this point. Now let's verify whether it has been created, that particular VM kernel adapter or not. So I'm going to VM kernel adapters, and you can see VMK2 internet test PG. It is mapped to our switch, and the IP address is 192.168.1.7, the same thing which we have given in our command. Okay, and it has been given, or it has been created through this command. Okay, not through GUI. Try to understand this. Okay, after the command execution it has appeared over here. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. So next step is we are continuing with the next command number 15. So to set the default gateway for VMKernel Adapter, so we have assigned our VMKernel Adapter's IP, but we need to set the gateway also. So what is the command for that? First of all, we need to get the VMKernel Adapter and then set the VMKernel gateway. So I will come back here and I will copy this command, going back here and pasting this. What is the command? Get VM host network, VM host 1, set VM host network, VM kernel gateway 192.168.1.1, that is our router, internet broadband router IP. Hit enter, and now you can see it has given the gateway. Okay, why the gateway is required? Because it will create a route to our internet connectivity. So to create that route, we need to give the default gateway. Okay, so let's move on to the next command. So next command is we need to repeat last 5-6 commands whatever we have done on ES0602 also. Okay, now from which command we need to start? 488 up to 493. Okay, so 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93. Okay, so what I'm doing over here is I'm going back to 488, right? And now we need to detect and set the existing ESX host 02 now as a variable. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm coming back here to my PPT and going back to 488 over here also, and the command what I'm doing is copying this command. Just try to understand what I'm doing. First I'm clearing the screen just to avoid the confusion. Paste, and now I'm changing two parameters. First of all, the variable name VMhost02, because we are setting this variable to ESXO02, and again the actual name ESXO02. Okay, VMhost2 ESXhost02, enter. Okay, so this command completed. Move on to the next one. Now we need to add the VDS switch to our VMhost 2 also, right? So the command which we have already copied, here we need to just change to VMhost 2. Coming back to my PPT and copying this command. So whatever commands we have executed on VMhost01, we need to do it on VMhost02 also, right? We have already set this variable, so now I will hit enter. Okay, this is completed. Let's move on to the next step. Next is we need to create one VM NIC. Also we need to add that particular VM NIC as a variable, right? So again I'm setting that variable on my ESX host 02. I hope I'm just explaining you guys as a clear cut instruction. If not, if it is too confusing for you guys, no problem, you can reverse this video, pause this video, listen it again and again. Okay, so coming back to my command, I'm just copying this command and entering here, and here carefully we need to change VM host 2 because we are applying this command on VM host 2 now. Enter. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's complicated. Once your logic is clear. Okay, now moving to the next command. So again we need to add our physical network adapter to VM NIC to distribution switch. Okay, same thing what we have done for ESX host 01 to add VM NIC to VDS switch. So add VDS physical network VM host network adapter VM NIC distributed switch VDS, right? So I'm copying this particular command over here. Copy, and one more time adding. Remember we have set the same variable but for the different host this time. So again we have to add this VM NIC, okay, to VDS switch. Enter and yes to all. Okay,